Hello, everyone. Welcome along to another VCO Esports Studio with me, Ben Constanduros. If you're unaware of what we're trying to do here, this is all about combining the worlds of virtual racing and real racing. And we have, over our catalogue of interviews over the last couple of months, some fantastic names that really represent both fields, both drivers and also team managers, and perhaps the odd influencer commentator. And today, the man that I have is exactly one of those people, but he is also a fanatical motorsport fan and now an international race license holder as well. Evening, René.
Hey, Ben.
René, let's clear one thing up first of all. I have to do this with lots of our drivers, includes Sebastian Job. How do you say your second name, René?
It's Buttler. I know that's
Buttler.
really hard, but I'm totally fine with whatever version you come up with.
Well, there's plenty of people that call you Buttler. But Buttler it is. So remember, well, that kind of was how it was. So remember that next time you are either working with René or indeed just addressing him in various esports paddocks and real life paddocks around the world. Now, René, first and foremost, you are you're a mad man, but you're a mad motorsport fan, right?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I grew up with Formula One, like probably everyone else in Germany, I would say, when Schumacher was still big. So I was always interested in cars, then got interested in sim racing because that's obviously the more approachable sports that you can do, right? I had always something on my hands with cars, although never as a job before actually diving into esports and my current job at rFactor 2. Well, I'm super happy that I can combine all of that now.
Now, so what came first? After your passion for motorsports, you're, I guess, best known for some of your casting and hosting in esports generally. Did that come before the motorsports, or was it the other way around?
No, it was the other way around, actually. I was one of the first European pros in sim racing. So I think in 2003 or 4, I actually had a full contract, paid and all that stuff. Obviously not the amounts that people get today, right? Because esports was way smaller. Sim racing was way smaller. And then at one point when I did my first pro series here in Germany, I think on the second season, I actually stopped since they offered me to do commentary for it. I loved it. So I was like, all right, I'll give it a try. And since then, I was lucky enough to host and cast various racing events. And nowadays, the last 5 years, also a lot of mainstream esports events and even a stadium show. So I'm quite happy about that.
Let's rewind then to that transition between becoming or being a motorsport fan following Michael Schumacher's career to actually getting yourself involved in esports racing. How did that come about? How did you know about this world straight away?
I mean, back then Facebook wasn't a thing, right? Or Reddit, all of that stuff. Yeah, I'm that old. So yeah. I was actually playing competitive Need for Speed, and many people not like that, but you probably heard the same from Danny Engels. He had the same background. So I did Need for Speed, was looking for something that's a bit more real. And as wheels came along in the market, I saw that, and I read an article, I think on PC Games back then, the print magazine, that had a very short review on Live for Speed. I liked it from what I saw. I was like, okay, that looks like a simulation. I want to get into it because I obviously played Microprose Grand Prix and all the classic simulations, GTR that was there back then, GP Legends, stuff like that, but never competitive. So I sold it for Speed, and then when I went on the internet, I actually saw a 4-players team league back then with Faculty and Okrana, all these let's say OG racing organizations. And I saw that they had their own liveries with their names on and logos, and there was a live broadcast, or it was more like a radio broadcast back then. I loved that. I thought that's really, really cool, and I wanted to actually have a car with my name on. That was the number one reason. So I was like, all right, let's get into Live for Speed. Let's compete. So that's how I got started.
This must have been a few years after Danny and Niels's kind of stardom in that field, though, right?
No, actually, Danny Engels was one of my drivers back then. So
I didn't realize you were that old.
Yeah, I am. So Niels was around because when I started, Niels was already on his way to claim a championship in the Pro Series back then. So I think on my second or third year, I met Danny, brought him to the team. He then got a contract offered by Faculty, so he went over to Faculty, started his career that you probably well know. I mean, he's still big in the business, which is great to see. But yeah, I'm a bit longer around than Danny, actually. even though he was probably more active in between, because I went away from esports a bit with my job as a test driver for car magazines and shows, while he stayed with sim racing the entire time. I was not always 100% on sim racing due to other activities.
Yeah, so after your kind of, as you say, professional career through Live for Speed, what happened next? Where did you go?
As I said, I actually went over to do commentating for a while, which was great. Back then, live streams have been the quality they have today, right? I did my first TV show in a basement in Cologne. That was ESL TV right before they bought NBC Giga. So I did some shows on NBC Giga as well. And at that point, then I decided that I wanted to do a bit more with my education. So went back, make sure that I could go to university, actually study to become a teacher. And while doing that, I went kind of off track because I got offered a job as a car journalist, since I had quite a few good laps while talking into a camera. Someone saw that. That gave me the chance to actually do that for a living. So I did. And then started to basically test everything that's sporty up to race cars. So I was lucky enough to drive an R8 GT3 and some other race cars. While I did that, I was not really competing in sim racing anymore. I think that was more or less the end of my active sim racing career as a driver. And yeah, from there on, I just tried to stick with sim racing, tried to stick with motorsport, and then find a way to just enjoy my passion.
What dragged you back into the world of esports, and moreover, kind of that very high level presentation and commentary that you've done over the last couple of years, away from what sounds like an ideal job? I mean, writing and presenting and about cars, that's amazing.
It's a bit risky, I can tell you that. So there are several pictures of me doing stuff on the streets that you should probably not do. And if I rewatch it nowadays, I would not do them again. But it was fun. Yeah, that's for sure. But at one point, it just wasn't enough really to make a proper living out of it. I mean, we know that print magazines kind of died, right? That made everything a bit harder in that genre. So from there on, I went back to university because I was trying to figure out what I want to do in my future, and I really wanted to do something with gaming, but I was kind of missing an entry point. That was the moment when ESL contacted me again, since, like I said, I had worked with them as a caster in the past, and they had a job that had a very specific skill set they were looking for, and not many people in Germany have those experience in esports and sim racing over all these years. So I took on the challenge. I handled basically, at that point, probably everything that was international racing games and sim racing events. So I created the Forza Racing Championship together with Microsoft back then, the Project Cars Major Series, the Esports WSC, which was my first project with me being in the lead. Still have a great relationship.
You say created. Were you kind of formulating the competitions as well as being in front of the camera and hosting?
Basically, yes. I started off with taking over the community management team back then on WSC 5, which was my first single role, I would say, in that. And from there on, I transitioned over to becoming project manager and also doing sales on that side, due to sim racing being completely different than mainstream games. All of the contracts you normally do or the ideas you come up with in sales, they don't fit, right? It's not Counter-Strike. Tournaments look completely different. The contracts should look completely different. So I was transitioning over to sales in order to make sure that the deal is actually correct, so it can be done in the correct way that it actually makes sense for racing games and for sim racing. So I started working, like I said, on the Forza Racing Championship, the format, the entire presentation, how a show should look like. Was trying to build the teams doing that, like admins, other casters. Ali Tag was one of my earlier pickups, actually. I brought him into, I think, Season 2, Final LA. He was working as my social media manager back then for Forza. And then I asked him, since I heard his voice, if he's interested in actually doing commentating. So his first big show was the LA Final. So he flew over. That was obviously big for me as well, actually getting the chance to commentate on the other side of the world on the racing game. So yeah, I had my fingers in most of the racing stuff, racing projects and series that you see. Even nowadays, I was part of the GT Sport World Tour as well. So yeah, I was lucky being involved everywhere.
And how did you find being in front of the camera or being behind the microphone, but also knowing so much about how the competition had been created, knowing the deals and the sales behind it. Was that very tricky to kind of separate yourself when it came to the live show part?
I don't think so. I mean, it gives you a quite unique view on everything if you know the backgrounds and why stuff was decided like this, why the show need to look like that, why need the format look like that. So you don't really struggling and actually having knowledge about the project, right? Since you had been involved anyway. I think although it hurts more than to read comments and all that, because as you know from you commentate yourself on these events and all that, there are a lot of people telling you how to do it correctly. And when you know what a client wanted to do with that show or what you have to achieve with it, and then you get all the criticism while also being in front of the camera, you can't really go out there and just say, oh, it's because of this, this, and that, and it's my contract, it has to be like this, right? You can't. So that actually hurt. And for a few years, that was hard to cope with because I was always interested in helping sim racing to grow. I'm a massive fan of it. I like it being part of motorsport, although I think it should stay separate as well because it is a proper sports. It is a proper competition. It doesn't need to lead into real life motorsport or be just like a small stepping stone. It's its own world and has its own stars. So that was always what I wanted to achieve. And then obviously it hurts when people tell you that it wasn't a good idea, but I guess you will never get away from that. There will always be people thinking they know better. Probably some of them do. I'm not arguing about that. Not every idea I had or project I did was as good as it could have been. As you know, sometimes the circumstances don't allow you to do something differently, or the budget doesn't allow you to do it the way you would like to do it. So that was hard in the beginning. Nowadays, it's a bit easier to live with that. If I ever get rid of it completely and not feeling bad when I read those comments, I don't know. Hopefully, maybe never. Who knows?
So how? I mean, I can see now the CV that you created fits very well with your role now at R Factor 2. How did that come about? Because and what is your role with that particular platform?
So at one point, I decided I would like to stick with one project. Talking about R Factor 2 now being a project, basically, because when you work on so many different esports series, you always want to do something, and then it got taken away, right? Because contracts change, they might go to another supplier because that's how business works. After so many years, they mostly change due to pricing, or they want to see a different way and different approach on your project. So you could never really achieve what you wanted to do as like the end game, basically. So I was looking for a role where I can stick with one particular product and then work on it. I met the guys from R Factor 2 a bit earlier due to a side project that I was working on, as I had a client that was interested in having their car in a game. So I got in touch with Dom doing back then. So we knew each other. So I just approached him and was like, all right, I would like to get into the other side now. So I was on the side of the provider for esports. Now I would like to be on the client side and actually build the product where esports can be held on, because I was used to back then when sim racing grew to a lot of games that hadn't been set up for that, right? They didn't have a broadcast mode, no overlays, not even a lap counter. People probably remember that from the first Forza racing we did. It was quite hard to figure a workaround out to actually get that to work without lap count and everything. So I wanted to be on the product side, and luckily R Factor 2 actually gave me that chance. And since then, my official title is business manager, which is kind of just mixing everything together, create a title, and it works. I mostly do still sales in the terms of talking to car manufacturer clients about esports series, how it could look like, formats, shows. I do licensing for new cars and tracks, or our license regarding the game if someone wants to use it for commercial use on a sim racing center, on a TV show, whatever. And I would say a bit of content and community management, since I'm used to cameras, so I try to create videos with R Factor 2. We did the one Dev Talk video for now, which is a series I would like to further build up over the time, and we're currently setting everything up for that. So it's a bit a mixture of everything I did before, which is great because every day is a new challenge.
And I guess that leads me on to kind of the two big R Factor projects of the last couple of months. I know that the Le Mans thing wasn't massively associated with R Factor 2, but we spoke to Dom, I think, a week before Le Mans. But the Formula E project you had been involved in for years before we actually saw the Race at Home Challenge.
Yeah, I mean, Formula E, the relationship between Studio 397, like R Factor 2 and Formula E is very old already, I would say, for that business. As you know, there was this Formula E Vegas Pro Series back then, which was on R Factor 2, but not an official, not official content or official series. And after that, it actually became one. So we started building the Gen 1 car. Later on, we built the Gen 2 car, bringing all the liveries and helmets of the real drivers into the game. And I was also commentating the E-races on site. So I was traveling, I think, the last 2 seasons with Formula E. And I was there at Formula E Season 1, since back then they did esports on Forza, and I was casting on that with Lee Demon Smith back then at Battersea Park. So I basically saw all the seasons of Formula E so far. And you're probably familiar with the E-racing series, right? Which is the fan activation before the race, where 4 of the real races go up against 4 of the fans that actually qualified on the rigs there. So I traveled to Santiago, to Hong Kong, and all the other race locations, and was having fun with people on the stage, commentating on the race and all that. And I'm super happy that we have this relationship with Formula E. It's a very exciting new way of motorsport. And we're further working on implementing that correctly into the sim, as obviously a lot of parts of Formula E are absolutely new and not really normal features in a sim racing game, either it's attack mode or fan boost and all that stuff, which is really exciting. So I'm happy that we can be part of the Formula E experience.
It must have hurt a bit to see comments from real world drivers, knowing that R Factor 2 is one of the best simulations in the world. And kind of seeing the way that they reacted the Race at Home Challenge, and obviously most famously Daniel Abt kind of commenting that it didn't feel very serious and therefore we didn't take it very seriously, I think was his quote in the video where he explained himself. That must have hurt quite a bit, not just for you, but for Studio 397, because you have one of the best simulations out there. Is it just so hard to simulate Formula E because there's so many moving parts, so many different things, and so many different tracks as well?
I think they're different parts coming together for such a statement. Like, first of all, it's totally fine what they say. They're all open to say whatever they want, right? Which we appreciate. And it's the car is based on data that is provided by Formula E for their own Gen 2 car. You know, they always do this one season car, right, with the livery and everything. And then the manufacturers change certain parts of the car. But since this series is new, and Gen 2 car was new, there's obviously no one just sharing all the information with you, because that basically means they're giving away all their secrets to the competitors, right? So it was based on the generic Gen 2 car, and then we tried to work with a few of the drivers, a few of the teams to actually get input and make this more real with every update we did to the car. The other side is obviously tires, which are completely different on Formula E cars compared to normal race cars, since they're not running slicks, right? They're basically running road tires for all conditions, which is something we didn't really had in the portfolio before. So I think we're fairly close. I have to admit, I never drove a Formula E car so far. We have a few drivers with us that did, that help us out to set up this car. So yeah, it's probably not 100%. Totally get that, which is due to the lack of data, although we now got a lot more data than before, which is great. So we can work on that, and we did already. The other side is a driver, at least from my experience over the years now, always complains first. It's nearly when we work with them, for example, the first day, it's always, oh, none of that actually fits. It's not like the real car. Nothing works. Completely incorrect. And next day, they're driving the same build, and it's like, oh no, it's actually really close, because obviously they're losing so much input from the seat and all that. While we sim races, when we go into a real car, we win input and we get more to work with. All of a sudden, they get far less to work with and to figure out how to drive the car fast. So that plus their competitive mindset mostly leads to them not really liking it in the beginning, but it gets better over time, I would say.
And ultimately, do we feel like there's going to be more improvements and potentially more things to come from your relationship with FIA Formula E? Because as you say, you know, as a racing series, I would say they were the forefront of putting on a really impressive esports series, well, esports event with the Visa Vegas Challenge. That was the first time any motorsport really sat up and took notice to esports. And yet we're now 6 seasons in, and actually nothing has really rivaled that from them.
That was a huge event back then. I have to say that it was amazing to watch. Unfortunately, not everything worked out. Just to make to maybe give a bit of background, because a lot of people ask us about that. The event was not done by us or the actual mod that was used there. So this was done by a different company that provided that. So it wasn't anything that we built. We didn't build the Gen 1 car used back then. We didn't build the fan boost mode that was used. And you know how it is, you actually work on a code that you're not so familiar with as we are, right? So mistakes happen, that's fine. But the event itself was still great. It was huge, a lot of media attention, obviously, to the prize pool. I mean, that was a lot of money back then on the line, even for esports. We're not there yet in terms of money, that's true.
No.
But we're definitely there, I would say, in terms of how it's actually presented. I mean, you have been part of that series, right? You saw part of it as well. It looks professional. The racing has a bit of chaos to it because, hey, those guys like to have fun, right? I mean, they're not paying for the car like they do in real life. It's not as harsh and punishing as it is in real life. So obviously, they take a bit more risk, and racing is about taking risk, and maybe it works out and maybe it doesn't, right? So that leads to a few more starting incidents, I would say, than it is in real life. But still, the show was great. So I'm more than happy that Formula E is still looking in the esports space, and I think it's the right way because it is a more young championship, a more young motorsport. It does a lot of things totally different from classic motorsport, and I think that's what we need. We need new inputs. We need new ways of getting people interested in racing, in sim racing, whatever it is in this whole cosmos of motorsport. And Formula E is definitely doing a great job there. I love it.
Now, I was really surprised to share a moment last October with you, I think it was. As somebody who's been in the world of motorsport for such a long time, you were so hyped and so happy and excited to witness the end of the WRC in Wales Rally GB, having just commentated on their Esports World Final. You're still completely so hyped about motorsport, and especially WRC.
Oh, yes. I mean, the two things. Like, on one side, I really love commentating and I love real life motorsport and sim, especially when it's a good tournament. And that definitely was a good tournament. I would say every single year. And as I said, it was my first project when I came back. So I was there in the beginning of Esports WC. Back then, we did actually, I think, over 10 studio shows leading up to the World Final on the first season. And then later on, we changed the entire system to make it a bit more rallying instead of hot lapping and all that. So I have been with Kiloton and Big Ben, or Nikon now, for over 5 years, working with them on the Esports WC and seeing a new final every year, a series that is still out there, because we also know from the years that we spent with sim racing how many series are created and then die immediately, because it takes a while for the sim racing scene to pick something up and be interested in it. And it also takes time, as you know, for storytelling to actually have something that you can say next year about the previous year. So there were a lot of cool series that died immediately, and Esports WC is already a niche in a niche because it's rallying. It's not the typical circuit racing that we see on R-Factor, iRacing, Assetto Corsa, or whatever. So I'm super happy that they managed to keep that alive for so many years and gaining traction bit by bit every year. So yeah, I'm hyped for every single Esports WC event, and I will be for the next years in case I'm still part of it.
And that real world feeling of being at the end of the stage kind of translates and shows that you love the real world of motorsport still. And over the last couple of years, you've had your own race team, and now as a very beautiful link with VCO, who support the digital NLS, you are now entering as a sponsored car with VCO, a real world team of, is it fair to say, influencers with Jimmy Broadbent alongside you? You kind of are. I feel like I should be part of it.
I mean, you can, feel free.
I don't think I'm brave enough, to be honest, to go around there in that.
That's not that hard. I say that now, but it is. I actually just saw my video since I got my first pole position on my first ever event, which was great. I just saw the video a few minutes ago, and it looks scary. I'm not sure if I would do that again. But back to the start of it. So last year, it's not years actually. Like last year, I had my 31st birthday, and we were joking around like all the things that you do until like list things to do until you're 30, right? And we were joking around, and in between, I actually tried to learn motocross. I never had a bike license. I never rode a motorbike. And I actually did 1 year. I bought a motocross. I went to the track, learned how to jump and race with it. Was all fine, but I thought it was way too dangerous because one day someone jumped on my shoulder, and I was like, "Do you really want to die just rolling around?" Wasn't a good idea. So I just went away from motocross. And on the birthday, I was like, you know what would be cool? Like an own race team, because if you own the car, you don't need to feel that bad when you crash it. And everyone,
no way around.
and everyone was like, yeah, sure, a race team would be great. Just do one, because no one took it serious, right? So I went back home, and it was like, who do you know from the past? And obviously knew an owner of a race team that is like part of motorsport for, I would say, 40 years, maybe even plus. So I called him and was like, I'm looking for a car. I'm on a very low budget. Is there any chance? And he was like, you know what? I'll give you a car, because I mean, we paid for it, but the price was amazing. I was like, we will help you to get into motorsport. You can have that one car that we have spare right now. You can buy it, and we will help you actually get it into racing. So starting end of 2019, we participated in our first grassroots events here at the Nürburgring with a Ford Fiesta ST with the old four-cylinder turbo engine. That was quite fun. It was great. I called some people like P1 TV, Dave Gaming, obviously ran to Jimmy Broadband because I worked with him on the GT Sport World Tour, and was asking like, hey, are you guys actually interested in racing? Because it's fun, right? It's a great experience. So we started. We have been quite successful. We won our class. And then end of the year, I had the chance to buy another car of the same team, which is basically our supporter team. So they're with us at the track. They help us with the documents, make sure that we are not doing anything stupid, basically. And we got the Astra Cup car, which luckily 2 months later actually became an official class again, because the car is a bit older, and it was an official class from 2013 to 2016. And after that, they closed the Cup class. But for 2020, they opened it again on the highest level, which is the NLS, or former VLN, the Langstrecken series here at the Nürburgring. So we had the car. I was super happy that we had the Cup class again. So the aim was easy. We wanted to go to NLS. We wanted to play with the big boys, racing with GT3s and all that stuff. But for that, you need to acquire an FIA international license and a Nordschleife permit and some other stuff. So that took a while for me to actually get the right results to be eligible for such a license. So I was eligible 3 weeks ago then. So I got the license, we prepared the car, and we did our first race, which was actually last Saturday, the 6 hours of Nürburgring. So the second longest race beside the 24-hour race. And as we want to stay true to saying we are a sim racing team that ventures into motorsport, we have sim racers doing everything. So we have a sim racer that is a mechanic. We have a sim racer there as a data engineer. We have a sim racer there as social media manager. We have sim racers as drivers. To all the test events, we took sim racers from our team for free so they can check out the car and see how it is to actually drive a real car on Hockenheim and Nordschleife that we used as test. So we try to do everything with sim racers rather than going somewhere where all of this is, like sending them to motorsport teams, whatever. Obviously, we help them, like our data engineer, for example. We try to get him to a level to have, there's a second team that's interested in his services, basically. So we do all the learning with him, and then he hopefully ends up with a Porsche Cup car. That's the current plan for him. So we try to help sim racers to experience motorsport and maybe find their way in motorsport, because we can't offer a career. It's my own private team. I'm not a millionaire. I don't have all the money laying around. What? No, I'm not. Oh. Couldn't help there.
I thought esports made you millionaire.
No, unfortunately not.
Okay.
Not really. So it's just great to work with all these guys that I know from sim racing now on a real car, because you realize during a 6-hour race all the differences between sim racing. As like, we have people messaging from our team like, okay, yeah, this and that problem with the car, we saw the data, just change this and that on the car, and you're like, guys, that's a live race. We can't just take the car in now and rebuild all that stuff and do a new setup and then send out. What is if the setup was really bad? Like some of us could crash, right? Because we were struggling with high-speed stability. And I was like, if it's worse, then we maybe throw away the car in the lab. So we can't just test that. So we need to find a safe way and something that we can do during a normal pit stop to not lose more time. And there's also no request new car button from iRacing when you crash, which is a huge issue. But yeah, we managed. We're a sim racing team, and we actually finished the 6 hours of Nürburgring. Super happy about that. And the pole position was a plus because it was actually in front of Volker Stritzek, which is an ex-DTM champion. And I managed to get a pole time. So that was the first ever in my life. Celebrated that a lot before actually diving into the real race again.
That's super impressive, super brave, but I it's just classic you to put yourself in such a crazy situation. I mean, there is so many opportunities to go racing and all the different tracks in the world, and you decide to do it at the Nordschleife. It's well impressive, of course, and obviously VCO supporting the team and looking forward to seeing all of the various content and videos that come out from it. And I believe you're going to get, obviously Jimmy couldn't join you for that first round, but at some point you're going to have Jimmy Broadbent alongside you, which would be epically cool.
Yeah, we're working on his documents. Obviously, it's a bit more complicated since he's from the UK, and we need to start with the German license and all that. So it's a lot of paperwork involved, but I hope so that he joins us soon, because obviously I would like to see him in NLS, right? But for that, he has to, I think, at least successfully end 3 RCN races. It was for me 3 to 4 to get him on the right license level. But if I can ever participate in NLS with Jimmy, I think that would be a huge thing. Bringing a solid team of sim racers. The big target is, and hopefully in 2021, and I hope that we can do that together with VCO, because they have been supporting us massively, and that's really great that they believe in the idea of doing a sim racing team that does real racing. We want to participate in the 24-hour race in 2021. And the additional target to that is to actually do that with a full sim racing lineup. So sim racers only in the car and sim racers only working on the car. Not sure if we make that, because that's a huge thing. On one side, getting the license, getting the guys trained for that, and also finding the financial budget, obviously, for it, because motorsport is way more costly than sim racing, unfortunately. But we want to try. We want to show that it's not just 1 out of 100,000 in whatever hot lap event that's good in a real car, but instead that it's common for sim races to be quick in a real car. And I can tell you, we had Dave Gaming, for example, for a test run. He just did his driver's license a few weeks before, and then we went on to Hockenheim to get him a race license. And I think 3 weeks later, he went with us to Nordschleife for his first testing. And he did 11 minutes in the rain on a Ford Fiesta. And that was the first time he saw the track. So it was the first time him lapping the track in the rain, doing 11 minutes. And Jimmy had great lap times in Hockenheim as well. We had Tim Neuendorf and Philipp Matzig from our sim racing team doing laps in Nordschleife and Hockenheim, both without any previous experience. And they all did super quick lap times, like way quicker than the average on these entry series. So I would say there's a ton of potential in sim racing, and if they ever all get the money to compete in motorsport, it will be very hard for everyone that comes from the classic motorsport side to be on top of the standings.
Well, as you know, René, I've done a C1 24-hour race, and I've raced a lawnmower for 12 hours. So I feel like I've kind of half there, but I'll volunteer as your team manager because I'm just simply not brave enough to do the Nordschleife.
You should try.
It's been, I can't even do it on iRacing or anything. It's too scary.
No, it's less scary in a real car.
Maybe, but not with a GT3 cars.
Yeah, not
no. René, thank you very much for talking to us. It's been long and very informative, very interesting, and so amazing to hear all of the different influences you've got in the world of sim racing and real world racing. And hopefully we'll catch up soon at some WRC event.
Yeah, thanks for having me. And I hope to actually see you on Esports WRC Final.
Good luck with the next VCO team at the DNLS as well, and the NLS. And thank you very much, René Buttler, who has joined us this week. Always Monday, 8 o'clock, it's the VCO Esports Studio show, and who knows who we'll have next week. Until then, bye-bye.